Welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the show. We're here today with a brand new Cabral Concept. This is our Total Wellness Tuesday episode of the week, number 1649. If you want to see all the details, the show notes, and anything we may happen to link up, feel free to go to stephencabral.com/1649. So the topic has come up over the weekend house calls for the past couple of weeks. And whenever that happens, I say, okay, now is a good time to reintroduce a concept or reintroduce some information maybe we touched on in the past, but let's bring it now to the forefront. So as I've said before, if I'm only able to help people with two things in life, if you could only allow me to help people work on two things, what would those things be? Number one is stress. Number two is the gut. If I can work on stress, aka the nervous system, and I can help someone with their gut, I will be able to help heal 9 out of 10 plus people. That means more than 90% of people with just essentially those two things. Now, if you give me the entire de-stress protocol, well, I believe, and from what I've seen, we're able to touch everyone. The de-stress protocol is simply the diet, exercise, stress reduction, toxin removal, rest, right? That's sleep. That's not always part of, right, the stress in the gut. We've got the emotions, we have the scientific supplement protocols, and we have the success mindset. That is how you truly heal. But what if we're talking about the gut? Why is that so important? Why do you keep hearing about increased intestinal permeability, which is simply the medical term for leaky gut? Well, again, why do we keep hearing about this over and over? Why is it becoming more popular? Well, here's why. And I talked about this, just last week, right? I believe, the gut and autoimmune condition connection. That was episode 642. If you have an imbalanced immune system, if you have unchecked inflammation, I can't recommend enough checking out episode 1642. Because on that show, I talked about how the gut affects the immune system. I'm not going to be able to go through that whole topic today because we touched on it in last show. We did a 25-minute or so show on that. Today, it's going to be on how to heal that leaky gut. So just remember, over 20 years ago, when I'm dealing with all sorts of immune issues, my immune system is completely dysfunctional. It's over-exaggerated on one side and underperforming in another. And that's not uncommon. They actually call that chronic fatigue immunodysfunction disorder or syndrome. There's a few other different variations, but it's CF, chronic fatigue, I, and then it's DS, right? So chronic fatigue, CFIDS. And what's happening is oftentimes there's this great exaggeration with Th2 dominant immunity. So I had massive allergies and borderline asthma and all sorts of unchecked inflammation. I was allergic to everything, multiple chemical sensitivities, mold, dust, grass, pollen, you name it, right? Allergic to a dozen different foods, common foods that we did every single day. So the problem is this, that I was underperforming whenever it came to bacteria, viruses, yeast, fungi, H. pylori, etc. That's the Th1 part of the immune system. So we have to understand how immunity works. And again, I've done a podcast on Th1 and Th2 dominance as well and how to look at those and correct those. That was episode 1565. So please do go back. If you haven't before, check out stephencabral.com/podcasts. All the podcasts completely free. They'll be free forever, for a lifetime. There'll be no, what do they call, paywall or anything in order to get them. The information is meant to be accessed by everybody. This is the information I didn't have 20 plus years ago when I'm sick, and doctors didn't even believe in leaky gut. They didn't believe in increased intestinal permeability. They made fun of it. That's where the word hypochondriac actually came from. Well, lo and behold, it turns out that the ancient Ayurvedic doctors, the Vedas, the traditional Chinese medicine, the ancient Greek, where the word, I believe it's hypochondrium, something like that. Yes, I believe that's it, where the word hypochondria came from. Hypochondrium being diseases manifest essentially, they start in the gut or the stomach, if translated exact, but it can actually be the 28 feet of digestive tract, which is our gut. So here's the thing. Now we know it's true. And, instead of doctors saying, well, I guess we were mistaken, no one ever says they're mistaken, right? No one ever says, sorry, we weren't able to help you, when in natural health, they've been talking about this for 6,000 years. They just say, well, there was no reliable test, and so science didn't test for it, and so apparently it wasn't there. Well, of course, it was always there. And that's why there's always an answer. It's just not always your practitioner or doctor knows the answer, and that doesn't make them a bad person. It simply just means that they're not educated in that particular field that you are looking for help on. Now, they might be the very best surgeon in the world, or orthopedic, or they might be the best podiatrist, like whatever it might be, right? And you may need to go to them for certain things, and that's great too. But what you want to do is when you want to fix your gut, you need to know how to do it. And that's what we're going to go over today. So my job is to open source this material. And if we're talking about your gut, we're really talking about not just the stomach where the food moves into, right? We're talking about the 23 feet or so of small intestine and the 5 to 6 feet of colon. If we're really talking about it, we're talking about the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum, the three parts of the small intestine. Because there's essentially a single cell that separates the outside of your body, which is that tube that moves through your body and then out of your body from your mouth all the way out through the anus. There's a tube that keeps all that bacteria and all the stuff that shouldn't be in your bloodstream, the food particles, etc., inside from touching the outside. But it's only a cell. And those cells they're abutted against each other very tightly. We call that a tight junction. That's literally all it's called, a tight junction. But then, because of antibiotic use, and again, it can be even as a child, right? It can be as a child, and you can have this as an adult. It can be because of unchecked inflammation. It can be with unhealthy foods. It can be because of stress. It can be because of alcohol. It can be because of certain medications, or low stomach acid, or low bile, or anti-inflammatory drugs, or toxins from the environment. Many, many different things can begin to compromise those tight junctions. When that happens, you basically get a larger space between the cells. Now, instead of you absorbing, right next door is your bloodstream, right? So right outside of the intestines is your bloodstream. There's your lymphatic system. There's a lot going on there, right? Very, very important. It's 80% of your immune system right there too, in and around the gut wall. Well, your blood cells are there. Your white blood cells are there. So they're ready to attack if they see anything. But ideally, they don't necessarily see anything. But when those tight junctions have opened up a bit, now all of a sudden they're exposed to pathogens. Could be bacteria, could be yeast, could be parasites, could be spirochetes, could be any number of things. Undigested food particles. It could be certain antigens, or I should say antibodies. Well, those are floating in the bloodstream also, I should say, as part of the body getting ready to attack any antigen that they see, right? Those are floating there as well. And we also can have toxins from the gut wall. Lipopolysaccharides, we could have excess metabolized estrogen metabolites coming back into the bloodstream. We could have, as I said before, certain types of bacteria. We could have longer protein-based strands, longer amino acid strands, all of which set off the immune system, okay? So when you set up the immune system, you're going to create inflammation, right? So it's basically inflammation in the gut. Now we've got inflammation in the bloodstream, or what's happening with the white blood cells. But typically, the bacteria, the toxins, they're going to go and they're going to land on, let's say, the thyroid, or they're going to move towards the joints. And then all of a sudden we have inflammation in the thyroid. We have inflammation in the joints. And in conventional medicine, we like to give those all sorts of different disease diagnosis. But we know in natural health that there's always a root cause. There's always an underlying imbalance. And we can start to see when we have these larger compromised junctions, we then allow what's supposed to be on the outside of the body inside. Think about this. Think about you with a leaky roof. Now, everything from the inside is coming into your house where it's not supposed to be, and it's ruining all the different items in your own house. Think about the overall rain barrel effect. When all of these things spill over from this putrefied water that you're collecting in this barrel that's rain runoff from the roof, right? And it spills over onto your grass and it can kill the grass or patio and it discolors it, whatever it might be. So think of this as essentially poisons to your body dripping into the bloodstream. And every time you eat, more and more come in, which is why so many people feel better when fasting. But, fasting is a big part of what we do as well. But it's not the cure-all. It's not the end-all, be-all. It's not supposed to be. People feel good doing 12 hours, so they do 16. People feel good doing 16, so now they do 20. People feel good doing 20, so now they only eat 1 hour a day. And that's not the answer. That's certainly not the long-term answer. Because what happens is you're putting a Band-Aid on something much deeper. I know that many people out there get bloating. They get gas. They feel like they retain 5 pounds of water at the end of the day. They have joint issues. They have brain fog. They have metabolism issues. They have immune dysregulation. And many of these things can stem from the gut. And they do, from leaky gut. So I get it. But remember, you have to go back to the root cause. You can't just say, well, I'm just never going to eat carbs again. It doesn't work that way, right? It doesn't work that way because then you throw something else off. That's a conventional medicine mindset. What I need you to do is not look at food as necessarily a form of medication. I want you to eat a good, healthy, well-rounded diet and not deprive yourself of any one macro or only allow yourself to eat a couple hours a day. What we need to do is get a balanced gut. Your gut is the epicenter. They call it the second brain. I did a podcast on why it's called the second brain. Again, you can go to StephenCabral.com/podcast, and up the top, there's little graphics, and you can actually scroll through them, and you'll see that I have a category just on digestion. It teaches you how to go through all the different protocols. It teaches you everything about biofilms. Again, so definitely check that out. This is just on leaky gut. This is just on the beginning. So I want you to think about this, though. Is that when these junctions in your gut wall, they become spread out further. So more of the toxins get into your bloodstream. Again, we explained what those toxins are, right? It can be hormones, it can be undigested food particles, it can be bacteria, it can be yeast, it can be parasites, it can be anything that resides in the gut. Because the gut, again, is supposed to be for digestion, breaking down. And then ideally, that gut wall only allows good nutrients in. And those nutrients can be processed by the liver. They can be used directly as glucose for energy, whatever it might be. So that's what's supposed to happen. And that's when you have tight junctions, right? And your immune cells can slip in if needed, if they need to work on something, and then that's it. They can move back out. So we know that that's how it's supposed to work in an ideal world. But for many people, they have these symptoms, but they've never been told that their brain fog, their fatigue, their grogginess, their tiredness after a meal, their bloating, their gas, their indigestion, any of these issues have to do with gut-based issues. But oftentimes they do. So there's essentially 5 parts. People come up with all sorts of different names for them. They're all great. You can call them whatever you want. But the first thing you want to do is be able to assess, okay? So this is how we're going to begin to heal this increased intestinal permeability or leaky gut. You want to assess, and you don't want to assess just leaky gut. You can. It's totally fine. But there's another level deeper, right? So if we're really talking about how do we get to the core of the onion, that middle piece of the onion, it's figuring out, well, what's causing it? And you can work with an integrative health practitioner. You can work with a naturopathic doctor, a functional medicine doctor that specializes in the gut. And you can say, okay, well, let's look at your diet. Let's look at your stress. Let's look at your lifestyle, right? Because all of those things matter, your medications, etc. But what we also want to say is, what else is there that's contributing to this? Okay, so you took antibiotics, you had, let's say, dental surgery, you got an abscess, you got an infection, whatever it might be, started taking antibiotics, and you didn't do anything while taking antibiotics, meaning a natural health-based protocol in order to keep that gut flora balanced. So now all of a sudden you have an overgrowth of bacteria. Bad bacteria, negative-based bacteria. And you also have an overgrowth of yeast. That is extremely common, right? So conventional medicine might call it small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. That means an overgrowth of bacteria, good or bad, inside of the small intestine. Shouldn't be overgrown. The small intestine is supposed to be a bit more sterile, not containing as much bacteria. Certainly more of the lower pH bacteria in order to keep it a little bit more sterile. But you can also have yeast overgrowth or candida overgrowth after antibiotic use, or with low stomach acid or low bile, etc. So here's what happens. Because again, a lot of people on acid blockers, and that leads to gut-based issues. So then you have to figure out, why do you have low acid, right? Why do you have low stomach acid or high stomach acid? Because acid reflux can be caused by hypochlorhydria, which is low stomach acid, or high stomach acid caused by a multitude of factors. Maybe it's histamine-based issues. Maybe it's stress. Maybe it's H. pylori imbalances. Again, there's multiple things it could be, but there's not a million things, right? There's about 6 to 8 issues of why people have higher stomach acid, or at least acid reflux. You assess those as well. So we're looking at essentially H. pylori, we're looking for yeast overgrowth, we're looking for bacterial overgrowth, and we're looking for parasites. And you can assess. So what you can do is you can run a lab right at home. We did a survey of our community. That means our podcast listeners, essentially, in our Facebook group. Our free Facebook group is cabralsupportgroup.com, completely free. Feel free to ask questions. Feel free to meet people all around the world. About 10,000 people strong or so right there. Pretty amazing. Totally no marketing, no advertising, just great people who want to connect with other great people, ask questions, get answers, share answers, etc. So we took just an informal survey. And about a quarter of the people listening to the podcast didn't even know that you can literally order lab tests that come right to your home without your PCP's essentially permission and granting you these things. And you're able to assess what's going on with your body. There's the Big Five, which is the most popular, that assesses hormones and omega-3s with inflammation. There's the gut-based testing, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then there's the minerals and metals test. Looks at your vitamins, looks at your minerals. They're amazing tests. You can do them right at home. Comes with a coaching call, comes with a plan. It's fully complete. It's one of the most amazing things that you can do for your health. There's no doubt about it. But you could run these labs with a local practitioner if you'd like as well. You can run them at equilibriumnutrition.com, or you can assess your gut function with an integrative health practitioner locally, a naturopathic doctor, or a functional medicine doctor that specializes in the gut, because not all do. So here's what you do though. You run a test called the Candida Metabolic and Vitamins Test, also called the Organic Acids Test, and you run a bacteria and parasite stool test. That looks at your yeast overgrowth, Clostridium bacteria overgrowth. It assesses full gut function. It also will look at on the stool test, parasites and H. pylori. So they're both great tests. And you can also do a food sensitivity test if you'd like as well, an IgG food sensitivity test. So those are amazing tests to actually say, hey, what's causing inflammation inside of my gut? Now, some people will do that. Some people won't. Sometimes it's a finance issue, and I understand that as well. When I was growing up, I had these issues. I was in the same boat as you. And so my mom, who used to take me to all different appointments, doctor to doctor, and really was there with me to try to say, listen, we have no idea what we're doing. None of these doctors seem to be able to help, but we just didn't give up hope. And so very, very grateful for my parents and being able to, go through that ordeal with me the first couple of years before we started to meet some practitioners that knew about what we're talking about here today, because they were out there, just much more difficult before the age of the internet, right? This is in the late 90s, and we were searching, right? Actually, mid-90s. So here's what you can do. Let's say that the lab tests aren't within your price range. And again, when I first went to a natural health doctor, we ran a hormone test and we ran a hair tissue mineral analysis. And then, because I was dealing with adrenal-based issues and fatigue, and then we ran gut testing. We didn't do them all at once. Now, it would have been better to do them all at once, but we could afford a certain amount. So we did that. And 6 months later, we did a couple more. And that's how it worked. And that works great too. But let's say you can't do any of the tests. I understand that as well. Let's say you can't do the starter kit, or you can't do the Candida Metabolic and Vitamins test. Well, you can do something else, but you have to remove. So even if you're not assessing, you can assume, and as long as you're not using medications, you're using natural health-based modalities, but you have the bloating, you have the gas, you have the digestive-based issues, you can use something like the CBO protocol. And I'm not going to go through that today. I've done a separate podcast on that. You can absolutely go through it. But what you can use are biofilm disruptors. You can use antimicrobials, antifungals, antibacterials that are natural herbal-based. And then you can use a specific pattern, which we're going to do now, to replenish the gut flora. So basically, we're assessing first, and then we're removing what shouldn't be there. The overgrowth of yeast, the overgrowth of bacteria, the H. pylori, or the parasites, right? So there's a parasite protocol, there's a bacteria and candida protocol called the CBO protocol, And then what you're doing is you're replenishing. So you don't always want to use probiotics month one. We don't. We've been doing this for a long time. We've gotten better results by easing those in. We have a very specific formula. I've given it all away for free on a previous podcast. I will link up the CBO protocol below today's podcast as well. And that will be at stephencabral.com/1649 is today's show. stephencabral.com/1649. And we'll link up the digestive topics as well as this one in the CBO protocol, since that's a whole show in itself. But we ease the bacteria back in the way that it's supposed to be, starting with more of the lower pH bacteria, allowing it to settle in, and then moving on to some of the bifido-based strains. I mean, this is very, very scientific, very, very, I keep using that those adjectives a bit more, but I want you to understand there's a big difference between taking a probiotic off the shelf at your local Whole Foods or Costco's or whatever it might be, and using a protocol that's developed through orthomolecular medicine and functional medicine that actually uses delayed release capsules and, the best state-of-the-art technology in order to help replenish the gut, and it's backed by science. There's a huge difference. You're just not doing this willy-nilly. And then what you want to do from there, so first you're assessing, I want to keep taking you through this, how to heal the gut. First you're assessing what's going on, okay? Then you're removing. Maybe you skip the assessment part and do it more like a questionnaire with your practitioner, okay? That's okay too. And then you move to the removal, something like, let's say, the Parapro support protocol, the CBO protocol, etc., okay? That includes the replenishing. You're going to then work your good probiotics back in. And then what you're going to do next is seal up that gut wall, okay? So now you need to pull those tight junctions back together. Now we know from medical science, because we want to use the best of ancient healing medicine combined with the best of state-of-the-art medicine. That's the best of both worlds. So we know that the gut actually starts to begin to heal in just about 3 days. How amazing is that? Take away the foods that are aggravating you. Begin to remove the bacteria, the yeast, the fungal overgrowth that's aggravating you. Remove some of those toxins. Start to wear away the biofilm. 3 days. It's amazing. But it looks like the best medical science we have, and this was stated in 2007, seems to still hold true today, that it takes about 12 weeks. Okay? It takes about 12 weeks. Sometimes shorter for some people, sometimes longer for those that might have Crohn's or colitis. Okay? But about 12 weeks. And so how do we begin to seal up that gut wall? And again, you can use this during your protocol, but we typically don't like to overwhelm people all up front. So we use it at the 12-week mark as the CBO protocol is ending. And we use a product that's going to contain at least glutamine and zinc. Okay, at least that. That's our minimum. Now, it's great if it contains aloe vera. You could do some marshmallow root in there. You could do some glucosamine. There are other great factors in there. Just check out our product called Healthy Gut Support. Again, you never have to purchase any of the products that I'm recommending that I formulated. All of those are available for you to check out at equilibriumnutrition.com. But that doesn't mean that you need to purchase them, okay? We're not treating, we're not diagnosing, we're not curing disease. We're working on underlying root cause imbalances. But you can see exactly what we do. That's why it's my job to open source this. I said that, again, 5 years ago. I said, hey, it's time for me. I know what we do works. We've been doing this for a long time. We've tweaked it. We've got it to the point where we know that it works. Now, let's try to share this with others. Let's open source it. That's the amazing thing. And I really believe that everyone at some point in their career or whatever it is that they do, they simply want to share what they know works. They've gotten to the point where it's not about competition. It's not about scarcity. It's not about keeping things secret. It's about sharing for the greater good. Some people will work with us. Some people will work with others. That's okay. I'm okay with that. But in the end, if we can help people fix serious mental and physical health-based issues related to the gut, well, that's pretty amazing. And I simply will just want to be a part of that. I'm one person in a greater health community that I'm trying to lift up. If all of us do that, then we lift up the entire community. And eventually, the natural health community becomes even bigger than conventional medicine. And that would be a great day. We can keep people healthy instead of them having to always rely on pharmaceutical drugs for chronic-based conditions. Nothing wrong with pharmaceuticals in acute life-saving care. But for long-term, 10 years or more, it seems like that may not be the best answer because of what else could happen. So after we seal up that gut wall, we want to do one more thing, and we want to maintain. And a lot of that maintenance now doesn't necessarily come from nutritional supplements, although something like the Daily Foundational Protocol, level 2 or level 3 is a great place, is that you want to begin to use good whole food nutrition as part of this process. People say, well, can I heal my gut? Will it just go away on its own with eating good food? Typically, the answer is no, because eating good food doesn't necessarily eradicate yeast overgrowth, parasite overgrowth, fungal overgrowth, bacterial overgrowth, mold, H. pylori. It just doesn't. It would be great if it did. I mean, I tried. It just didn't work. So what you can do, though, is you're, of course, going to eat good, healthy food along with this protocol. But afterwards, you're going to include good, healthy, whole food nutrition, plenty of vegetables, a couple servings of fruit, good quality protein, very little fried food. And again, many other podcasts on this. I'm also going to do a follow-up podcast in the next week or two, so definitely stay tuned for that. On prebiotics. I haven't done a whole show dedicated to prebiotics yet, although I have spoken about them many times. I don't actually believe that you need to take a nutritional supplement for prebiotics. I believe that you can get them through good whole food nutrition. Probiotics, well, oftentimes that's good to take as a nutritional supplement. Easier to control the type that you're getting and the strains that you're getting. Easier to control that way. I don't have an issue with certain types of probiotic-based foods. Don't have an issue with that. But in my practice, I work with a lot of people that are histamine sensitive. And if you give them a lot of fermented foods or kombucha or, again, sauerkraut, etc., doesn't react well with their histamine levels, their mast cells, right? Cytokine levels. So we can do it in different ways, and we can actually use some lower histamine-based strains that we include with our daily probiotic support. So again, I want you to know that there is an answer, that you can assess, that you can begin to remove, that you can begin to replenish the good bacteria that should be there, that you can then seal up that gut wall, and that you can maintain. And this whole process takes about 12 weeks. About 12 weeks to remove, and after you remove, you can then start to seal up that gut wall. The differences can be absolutely life-changing. So if you believe that you might have some type of health-related condition, both mental or physical, related to gut permeability, I can't recommend going deeper on this, learning a bit more, and then beginning to assess yourself or getting right started with removal. So hopefully today's podcast was helpful. This is certainly not the last time I'll be talking about this. Always happy to do follow-up shows and follow-up answers. So do stay tuned every single day for a new Cabral concept. Thanks so much. And as always, if this podcast was helpful, please do feel free to share it with anyone you believe it could serve. Before you go, I wanted to share a personal story with you. The real reason I began to get well finally is because I figured out what was wrong with me. And that might seem pretty obvious, but I went from doctor to doctor for over 2 years before discovering at-home functional medicine lab testing. These are the labs that enabled me to finally figure out what was wrong with my hormones, blood sugar, electrolytes, and gut health. And once I knew what was wrong, I could then follow a proven plan in order to rebalance my body from the inside out. This is why I believe so strongly in functional medicine lab testing and why I've made it my mission to share these labs with the world. Now at equa.life, you can order an at-home lab test or a lab bundle for you and your family and be able to complete it within the week. Plus, the EquaLife difference is that you're not left to try to read and figure out these labs on your own. We explain what your lab numbers mean, what they mean in the much bigger picture, and then how to go about rebalancing your body in order to heal. To see our full selection of lab tests, or to set up a free lab selection call to find out what labs may be best for you, simply head on over to equa.life/labs. And do remember, we ship these all over the world. To find out more and to set up your free lab selection call, simply head on over to equa.life/labs. That's EQUI.LIFE/labs.